the bitter truth about the economy is that the common person does not know about the proper American system of political economy. They'll say they haven't heard about it. Well, the last time I checked that there at least was still a subtitle within a chapter, within a title, somewhere buried beneath the history book, a section, and even last time I checked, even said the whole section, the American system. And this was pointed out to in the book, usually even an AP US history book, an advanced book, supposedly, had plunked this American system subtitle, and then following half a column of a page explanation of it, or explication of it. That's where it was relegated. That's where it is. In jail, stuck, surrounded by a context of postmodern chaos. And they'll say Henry Clay talked about the American system. Now even Wikipedia has had to, I think, mend its own presentation of the American system because of such undeniable research, modern research into even research that was there for decades and perhaps maybe half a century and more, when you start getting into the primary documents and you start talking about economists like Matthew and his son Henry C. Carey. These were the titans of American system political economic thought, which, as in the case of Matthew Carey, the father, reached back to even before the Declaration of Independence. Well, or sometime around that. The story is interesting. I ran across it a while ago, so I'm not going to try to give it. But Matthew C. Carey was a revolutionary. He got his way into a printing house in Ireland, and much in a Benjamin Franklin earlier younger way. When Ben was younger, like that, like Do Good, I think it was. He started writing pro-American pamphlets. He started reprinting pamphlets, probably by Thomas Paine. I think he may have reprinted the Declaration of Independence. He got into hot water and was the word came down for his arrest, and I believe he was quickly taken away by allies to I think a priest in France. Yes, where he encountered Lafayette and Benjamin Franklin, and obviously his reputation preceded him, and he was very young. I think when this started, maybe 19. Sort of Lafayette youth, even Alexander Hamilton was out of not recruited out of college, but out of Columbia College, was recruiting his own battalion, I think, of artillery, or he was recruiting his own regiment to be the head of it. And this was the fervor that was going on. This was the American system. Versus what? Well, we celebrated recently the 1776 document, the Declaration of Independence, and what it meant for not just the nation, but for mankind. To hear the words that all men are created equal, and to see its fruition in a republic. It's imperfect, and it has the sores left over from the imperial yoke against which they fought. And they fought valiantly for the American system, which was a first get the heck out of here British system. It was, you can remunerate the causes for grievance, as I recited last week in the Declaration of Independence, which is the sort of middle section. There's the note the one that we care about so much, about all men created equal. It's preamble again, and then it goes into grievances, and then it really brings it back to the principles, like the preamble of the Constitution. These things were created under the very similar circumstances by some of the very same people, and the very same Leibnizian philosophy for happiness versus Locke's mundane, materialistic obsession for property. So the pursuit of happiness means something, and it's intertwined with this idea that all men and women, but to use the jargon, which is not so hurtful, all men were created equal. Even it's, at least, men have to share their names sometimes. It's actually kind of emasculating. In this case, they're sharing it with women. Women never have to share their name with the men usually, but here, man, and in this language, rest assured that we are discussing the ability and promise of the human mind and soul, like we talked about in the body, but this single individual human being that can be developed, again, mind, body, and soul. This is not an 18th century feudal peasant. This is the prototypical citizen found in the United States before these documents, the Declaration and Constitution, were even thought of. I don't want to know. I don't want to venture into a stat. I'm not really into stats, but this stat kind of stuck out for me for a long time. That at the time of the Revolution, literacy was something explosive, like towards 90% or something in the colonies. The so-called Latin farmer was well educated, compared to something that you might find in the teens at the literacy rate in England. So this was a peasant in England, and they were being made use of as cannon fodder against their brethren and their smarter brethren in the Americas, and their personal labor and dignity were destroyed, and not just really under attack, as all empires attack their own land just as much as any. I mean, that's why we're not against the English people. It's the Britain, it's the house, this House of Windsor, uh, which typifies, even if it perhaps began, now it just simply typifies the what's called Anglo-Dutch liberal monetary financial system. You'll know it by their proper names as Wall Street, City of London, and the European Central Bank, and the whole independent European banking system, which is against the American system. So the American system wasn't just some campaign slogan or word of convenience for to be spoken in rhetoric on the House and the floor by the leader of the representatives. I believe that's what Clay was doing. They'll say, oh, in 1820, after the whole John Quincy Adams presidency period, or really, during the same kind of period, Quincy did take the presidency while Clay, I believe, was second. But they worked in tandem because they both understood the American system as stemming from, since it's embedded in the revolutionary document, the U.S. Declaration of Independence, then it actually is a revolutionary principle. Don't freak out. You must be a revolutionary today, and it means nothing about overthrowing our government. It means about rediscovering the revolutionary principle embedded in our act of independence, and the codification of that act through the Constitution. That embeds so that it was a constitution of citizens, which was a situation which was revolutionary around the world, around the imperial world, colonial world. This was a new idea, very powerful in its pithiness, in its pith. And didn't stop by, the idea didn't stop with these declarations, from the U.S. Declaration to the Constitution to the Emancipation Proclamation. It didn't stop, but they were punctuated by those effects. Those events weren't the fruit of themselves. There was an active idea that was embedded, that was discovered from individual to individual and passed through individual to individual and past generations. The citizen is a revolutionary idea. That's the you might say bitter truth about that. It's only bitter to the people who are still having a problem understanding the equality of their own humanity and share. And it's not a matter of sharing, your slice of love of the word humanity. It's about recognizing something that is universal within yourself, that flows through you, that flows through every human being, regardless of race, all that. And then the human beings, they're universally charged with this mission to realize more and more that creative spark of reason, that soft infrastructure between the ears we've heard. That's the bitter truth to some people. That, hey, I actually do matter. I actually do have a say. And it's not just a thumbs up and thumbs down bestial imperial say. I have a say because I can understand the economy as a whole. And if you understand the American system, again, something before clay, which was developed by Alexander Hamilton, and it was developed by Benjamin Franklin and the Massachusetts Bay Colony, as you'll find their work on the benefits of a paper currency, driven by the credit of the nation, not by speculation. So that's the American system versus the British system, which is the speculation system. It is the money system. It is the hoard the gold and have a gold system. It is a system of convenient infrastructure where needed to suck out the resources and energy of a colony, be it America, slavery. That's a slavery system. Be it not just slavery of blacks, but of Americans. Slavery into a colonial system. Be it from Africa, probably one of the most stark situations today with the extraction of African resources. Look at the rail lines and the roads, which they are fixing with Chinese help with the new Silk Road. But you look at places like India, and they were also touched by, and China before the explosion of the revolution in rail project. If you looked at China and India, you would see the same the imperial destruction against which the American Revolution was and is fought. That's the bitter truth to some people who cling on to fantasies. It is simply the truth to those who have outgrown their childish ways. And the truth about that, the bitter truth, maybe, to some organizers, is that the exoneration of Lyndon LaRouche, as complicated as you might make it, the case is simple. The exoneration itself is simple. The case, there's a big book. It's called Railroad. You should read it. But the case for exoneration is not only simple in the sense of that it is a reasonable idea which solves practical problems in the political sphere, for example, right now. Because to exonerate Lynn is to open up his ideas, and not just the flood of them, because there are many. But I think what we're looking for is to open up the 4 laws. His most powerful recent ideas that reach a simple truth through this 4-part ironic, really self-developing, the one related to the other, and the first and the last as well, in the middle. But you exonerate the 4 laws, which are absolutely necessary for this economy, because right now it is built on speculation. It is built on the British system. It is not built on the American system. And right now, the American system can be unlocked in the most pure, highly developed, scientifically developed, modern manifestation under what people know as LaRouche's 4 laws, economic laws. And that it takes 4 powers: the United States, China, India, and Russia, to understand this and to enter an ecumenical agreement. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The 4 laws, which you must understand, are practical. The Glass-Steagall is a practical law that was passed by Franklin Roosevelt against this type of banking speculation potential collapse. So that you would have a banking holiday, close every bank for 3 days, and then open them up tier by tier, day by day, as they are made solvent, as the bad debt is separated from the good. And some won't reopen it all, because they're just so terrible. But that the daily operations of the nation will continue uninterrupted for the most part. And that society values those debts. Society values those deposits of average Americans more than they are afraid of a speculative collapse, which will occur. But if you're protecting the meaningful things in life, human beings and their well-being and their infrastructure, soft and hard, and their daily lives, their jobs of employment, their productive, hopefully, employment. You need a Glass-Steagall which separates the terrible, toxic speculation from what is federally protected as your deposits, your actual liquid deposits, so that they're not being used to pretend so that $1 of yours isn't prancing around the stock market and parading around as like $10 or $100. Meanwhile, they lose your dollar, the 100, they lose yours, worth $1, and then they've walked away with a 50-cent fee in the middle. No, okay, so we're going to separate those banks once again, like FDR, using the Glass-Steagall Act, which is already pushed by sitting congressmen and senators like Warren, Elizabeth Warren, I believe, and Marcy Kaptur in the Congress, I believe. But that's ready to go. The first law, LaRouche's first law, is already on the books. Is being pushed by sitting congressmen and women, a lot of women, I guess, both in the Senate and the representative legislative body. That's the first law. The second law, which is going to be tricky, which is really going to test you, but you'll realize its necessity after you've passed the first law, which is why it's designed like that. See, LaRouche's economics aren't chopped up into chop suey. They are composed as single ideas. So he says, if he says he's got 4 things to talk about, he's really saying, I've got one thing to tell you, one thing to talk about, and I'm going to try to crack it open into your head in 4 different ways, so once you crack this LaRouche's first law, the Glass-Steagall, it says, well, now we're stuck with a Federal Reserve, an independent Federal Reserve bank, and that has no access to all of the money that was previously keeping this vampire alive, this blood-sucking vampire alive, through your deposits. So then you will have, if you just sit there on your rear end, and you will have a banking crisis and a massive devaluation of these fake derivative bets that were being made for so long. They're being made off of your money. That's why they're fake. And when you say you can't do that anymore, which was the standard against to fight against a depression coming on, these were the steps to take. And so once you realize the bankruptcy of the independency of having a bank that's independent of government, that's old school. That's the British system. The American system, as codified as the ideas of equality and happiness were codified in these documents, from the Declaration to the Constitution, these were made practical by again, by Alexander Hamilton reaching back to Benjamin Franklin, reaching back to the Massachusetts Bay Colony, reaching back to anything in the cameralist, you might say, dirigist history. You can probably even go back all the way to France, Colbert and Cardinal Mazarin. But I mean, the use, the ability, the purpose of a nation state is to protect its general welfare and its posterity. There are many ways to do that. In many ways, they must do that. And one of those ways is to save your deposits from fake banks that are from a treasonous system, which is foreign to our own positive domestically evolved, grown, system, which is the American system, which says that private life is to be valued and the private sector in the economy is to be valued. But it's to be so valued that it's to make sure that the private sector, that its public utilities are cheap, and that its public wants for that are from anywhere from healthcare, they'll be protected by unions and by the federal government regulations themselves, and that money uttered in this way solves that problem of the central bank basically disappearing, falling on its own weight, and just simply digitally disappearing if you ignore it long enough. So you might have to not give so many bailouts to CEOs and their big salaries and all the benefits and share options, shareholder options, all these things. Some of that, I'll drop a tear or whatever sometime when I think about it, maybe. But they'll be re-educated into how a dirigist American system economy works. So that you'll need LaRouche's second law is necessitated after the first, the Glass-Steagall Act, is implemented, which is that you're now going to need a nationally regulated bank. And FDR couldn't quite say it like that or do it, but he did it like that under something called the RFC, the Refinance Corporation, and started, I guess, millions in our terms, billions, I guess, just through the Treasury, and the consent of Congress and all that, which is all this is constitutional. This is the only thing that's constitutional, really. I mean, there should have been a national bank, but this acted as a national bank. So we can have a national bank which is not governed by bureaucrats from Wall Street, 10 London Street, 10 Downing in London. It's not governed by the European markets, the floating exchange rate system and all that. No, this creates a dollar system, which has a kind of a reserve value that it's just something that might matter. Maybe something matter more even than gold, but something that some kind of commodity or basket of commodities, some kind of value will emerge that it's stable for a dollar, and will be stable. Therefore, what do we do now that we have the stability? Well, okay, you have LaRouche's third law, which is that you have the stability, you've had this regulation, you have this national bank which has the teeth of the Constitution, which says that it's there for the general welfare. It has to promote public things of public utility for a burgeoning private sector to personify the American experience, which should be universalized as the human experience. We're that beacon of light and hope, that citadel of hope that was once spoken of us. And we did it in this way, in this American system way. So the American system shouldn't be a subcategory of a subcategory of a subcategory. It should be the title of the book, of the history book. And I believe it is the title of a certain history book by a certain brilliant, no longer with us physically, materially, but is with us physically, who wrote the book on the Civil War, which really was the war of rebellion. It never was a war; it was just a rebellion. But it was really casted in the title as American System War against the British, or something to that effect, and it captured that the spirit of the American system was as revolutionary from the very beginning, from people like Matthew Carey and how he immigrated to the United States under such conditions. I think he dressed as a woman to make it across. I mean, he was running from these murderous British, the murderous British, and he made his way. He escaped and became the kind of leading mouthpiece of Hamiltonian and Franklinonian Benjamin Franklin's work, but disguised in its own little guise as I think essentially by the time that Hamilton was murdered and out of the picture, that there was no longer this Hamiltonian faction within the administration, U.S. administration, but that there was a split with this, bitter Adams versus Jefferson, which Adams took the first round, and Jefferson taking the second too. But and they later became friends, and probably over this American system issue, because the pamphlets, the printing operation that Matthew Carey wrote were ostensibly under the Democratic, if I remember correctly, under the Democratic purview, under their, because every publication virtually, or I guess that I know of, were partisan, were publicly partisan, and were bitter, and they would say some crazy stuff, but Matthew Carey operated underneath the Democratic side, which gave strength, almost like a Furtwängler stuck in Germany. Like he was giving Jefferson and Monroe, or eventually Monroe, to work, and obviously John Quincy Adams. He was giving them the education of the American people that they required to be able to operate and understand what the American system is and was and is. And so it relied on a handful of, maybe not quite a handful of, but these papers that were first written by Alexander Hamilton, which discussed essentially the whole American system. I mean, from the paper currency to the national bank to to how you would to what kinds of to the inventions and discoveries that undergird the republic, which is this third law. Now we're talking about the third law, but the second law requires the national banking system. However you want to do it. The third, you want a sovereignty over your credit. You want to be able to issue it on your terms for your projects, and not be stuck in some sort of speculative cycle that is starving for 20% returns or whatever the heck. I mean, the only kind of returns you get in drugs and prostitution, and human trafficking, and it's there. It is.
So this Glass-Steagall is very much so a separation from that black money, uh, black market money. Uh, but this leads to our third law, which is that what do we do with all this money? And it's a great feeling to have, a great problem to have. Once you've instituted the first two laws, they anticipate this third law, which needs to be discussed, which is what do you pay for? And again, it's what we've already said before: the public good, the public welfare, public infrastructure, soft and hard. Soft being schools and medicine, and hard being the railroads and the infrastructure of transportation, water, treatment and distribution, irrigation, and power. Let's not forget power. How have we not talked about? Okay, well, we're gonna need to. That's the fourth. That leads it into the fourth law. So once you've have freed up this money, you've morally separated the deposits of the average person from the satanic greed of Wall Street and London and all over the imperial world, has its tentacles. Once you've separated that, then you've created once you're not relying on the juice, the liquidity of other people's bank accounts and the juice of black tar heroin and all its forms, opium and meth and all these black market ways of shoving liquid money into the fire and into the flammable toxic waste debt that is accumulated through the derivative system, monetary system. So once you've divorced that, you say, well, what's the positive? You got to look at the positive. What do we value? Where do we put all this money? And like I said, it's the infrastructure. It's what's public. How do we make the private life of a citizen more valuable, or give it more value using a public platform without invading? You might say it's personal creativity. Well, you make things around it cheap, like water, like power, like food, stick with public goods, utilities, and things like that. So you invest in all of these major projects, from huge dams. Maybe even make a song about them. I know there's a cool song about the Grand Coulee Dam. One of Woody Guthrie was employed by FDR but we stopped building these cool dams, and now we're stuck with the absolute chaos of the flooding of the upper Missouri and Mississippi this season. Absolute destruction there, because we stopped dedicating ourselves to these water encatchments, these levees, these lakes, if you need them, ways to avoid the injury to life and limb that these quote unquote natural disasters occur under. So you have to value public infrastructure, which values public infrastructure. Building a railroad, you're going to need the bill of materials, and the government isn't going to run the mines and the concrete, the chemicals, the metals. These are all going to be farmed out to private entrepreneurs who will be in this way indirectly involved in benefiting from even the initial stages of a responsible banking system. We call it the credit system, the national bank credit system for productive projects. And yes, small, medium-sized enterprises, but also bringing back the family farm and things that are straight up American, but again have this universality to it that it does invite the four powers again of Russia, India, and China to do the very same three laws themselves. And really, let's talk about this fourth law. They need the fourth law too. The fourth law needs us all. The fourth law brings fusion and space together. So we need to, and going back to what do we value as a national bank? What do we value as a national currency? As credit, as productive employment? Well, part of this is R&D, research and development. It's straight up in the Constitution. We like to ignore it a little bit, but we need to flood like nobody's business, into the what was the Apollo project. I guess now it's the Artemis project, but it's the Lunar Mars Gateway project that the president has endorsed and given dates, but the Western corporate media is just sleeping on it. But it's LaRouche's fourth law. I mean. So the first law is already in the Congress. It's already endorsed. The last law is already made a law by President Trump. We just need to fund the heck out of these things and show the beauty that is so crystal clear when discovering science, things of science, discovering chemistry, and the interface of inner and outer space, and how this has probably a density of singularities, that things that don't make sense in outer space that make sense in inner space. These are things to be studied by universities, not just the aging Apollo engineers, but we need a whole new budget boost for research and development, which is the interface of ideas and practical implications. Practical in a sense of very super practical of we need to get this life, we need to not lose life in outer space. So you're going to be crossing your T's and dotting your I's. And life is very much, it's a matter of life and death, really, really starkly. And this beautiful mind that has studied these things is in jeopardy here. But also, it's going to be the interface of economics, where we call these things spin-offs. How something like laser technology can cut a beam with such precision that it can, do things that otherwise would not be able to be possible. When we attack fusion and the fusion torch, and we can just throw in garbage and break it down to hydrogen atoms, and create this plasma which cools at different temperatures, and it distills isotope at an isotopic range level ability. The fusion economy is both for outer space and inner space, because humanity is a universal creature. The universe pumped us out. It didn't pump out mosquitoes that feed and no. It pumped out creative, beautiful individuals, and who can eradicate poverty. That's not a pipe dream. It never was a pipe dream. It was joked at to the point of being a beauty pageant line, world peace. But it's a thing, And world peace is only the beginning, just the beginning. And we need the four laws. We need to exonerate Lin, his four laws. The bitter truth of the economy is that we need to be in front of this. It's kind of a rear guard action in that we're trying to protect motions for the four powers to agree on things, and at the same time you got Donald Trump and others who are touting an economic boom in shareholder value or something very intangible that pops up regularly, dependably on digital screens, but is a finger snap away from disappearing into the nothingness that it is, leaving us bare with our physical means. And if we haven't, and maybe then, but we'll be smart enough to start a national bank before we start throwing up nukes everywhere. So check out EIR with that bitter truth about how to get what the truth is of the economy, which stinks in the United States. The only thing making some money are some middlemen and associated with the Caymans and Wall Street and all these people, but Trump should free himself from the all too low-hanging fruit for a reason. It's rotten by now. Of clinging on to the numbers that pump out of NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange and the exchanges around the world, because those are it's literally people playing with monopoly money, and at the end of the game it's all worthless. It's like the emperor's clothes. It'll work for a while, but people are going to be like, what? Nah. So we should be obsessed. We should be concentrate. We should focus on LaRouche's four law, the exoneration of LaRouche, the freeing up of his four laws, which is one, the American system. It is a Renaissance principle. It's a universal principle of Glass-Steagall Banking Separation Act, leading into a National Bank Act, which leads into the creation of credit for productive purposes, both public and private, which leads into the real ecumenical four-power agreement to work together, human to human, for a fusion space economy. If we don't get off this planet, you can forget about the biology system.